ignored, that video will get over 40,000 views in a couple of days. So that concerned me when I watched this video, not only because of a couple of things she alluded to, but the male response to it. The female response was them going back and forth debating about whether or not men could be trusted and to what extent. The male response was to overly laud her, right? That female worship thing. But so what I said when I posted this video on Facebook and then on a number of other platforms, I said, I've been seeing a lot of these videos lately where black women have been contemplating asking black men for help and reassessing being soft enough to do so. Or they've questioned the value of interdependence over being singularly independent. And I've noticed how many black men can't wait to be appreciated at nearly any expense. It's interesting to say the least. Still, I can't help but notice the timing of it all, especially after 5 decades of emasculating dismissal. Notice how none of these videos suggest what she'll do for you. Instead, they'll just focus on her learning to appreciate your utility to her. I grew up when mantras such as "I don't need a man" and "niggas ain't shit" were spoken quite often, and with a nearly religious zeal, even by the classiest of educated black women. I saw it on TV and movies and heard it personally, often, and met scores of black men from all over who noticed it during the same time period. As I'm not wholly against this development, I can see how it could be a good thing if done with sincerity, I suppose. It is what it is. On another note, men, be careful and watch this development closely. Make sure there's a difference between being asked for your help and being expected to serve as a footstool or servant. After being historically seen as a lesser being, only capable of providing sperm, sex, and occasional physical protection, if you weren't a 1% man, i.e. a man making over $150,000 a year, such a quick shift merits caution. Make sure you articulate your needs in a relationship and that she be as eager to be as much of a value to you as she requests of you. If you observe a shift back to emasculation, dismissal, insult, shaming, or guilting tactics, or argumentativeness, do not accept it. Be careful of people performing a respect they don't actually have for you. As men value genuine respect far more than people think, it can be as negatively impactful to have false respect as it is positively impactful to have genuine respect. And if you choose to be in a relationship, remember to value your peace. I'm going to say that again. If you choose to be in a relationship, remember to value your peace. And avoid making her validation a reflection of your self-worth. Again, avoid making her validation a reflection of your self-worth. That alone can be the difference between life and death for us. The stress level that black men feel in trying to define their worth based on what women say about them, what their women say, particularly those they're in relationships with, and hell, even daughters for that matter, mothers, grandparents. Look, I'm gonna need you guys to really start taking an entirely different view of yourselves, especially in relationships. Too much of the time, relationships are a one-way street. We come into it talking about what needs to happen for her, and that's it. I've said this repeatedly. When I ask my students how many of you have lists of expectations of your future mates, only the women have lists. And I was around when that started. They were being socialized from the 1980s onward to have demands. But those demands were not even related to the reality of our income levels or any of that. They were just arbitrary demands. And we all know what they are. Be over 6 feet tall, make over 6 figures. We've heard this, and the lists go from there, right? But whenever I asked my male students what lists they had, she looked good. She got to look good. And to be honest with you, that was never stated. I assume it. But when I asked them the question, what expectations did they have of a future mate? I never had one student provide me a list. Male student. Not one. The way we've been socialized, relationships are designed for women. And when you begin to question what practical need is there for men, asking the question is enough, is grounds enough to have you eliminated, canceled in cancel culture, right? I'm not against relationships. I was married. And for the most part, every marriage has its bumps. I wasn't wholly unhappy. I'm not on a tirade against relationships and marriage. I'm on a tirade against men arbitrarily doing it and never even asking the question what exactly they're supposed to get out of it. Because so far the discourse is solely about her. And then what do you hear? Happy wife, happy life. If y'all don't get that bullshit away from me, we are human. You ain't the only one that has needs. And for men, I'm going to tell you, if you don't know how to articulate it, fellas, the number one item on any list, really in any relationship, even with your boys, but especially with your woman, is respect. I don't care if she's having sex with you every day, cleaning, cooking, I don't care what it is. If there's no respect, you have nothing. It ain't worth it. It ain't worth it, fellas. So that said, getting back to this question about are black men at war alone? We looked at law enforcement. We looked at activism. We looked at politics. And granted, we're just taking snapshots, right? We looked at education. And we're even looking at the current moment where we're starting to see more and more black women publicly articulating a need to reconnect. And I say reconnect, right? Because we've heard for decades that black men weren't needed. Y'all tell me if I'm making it up. I've been hearing this shit since I was in elementary school, right? So we've started to hear the value of reconnecting with black men, and in our zeal as men to be honored, to be acknowledged, to be appreciated, we jumping through hoops. And yet, if you stop, slow down, and get your own needs, your own wants out of the way and actually listen to the conversation that's being had, too much of the time, it still doesn't include you. You are a utility. You are a vacuum cleaner. You're a car. I'm talking about the way you're viewed. This is not... Look, if your own basic self-respect doesn't allow you to see when somebody is talking about you as a tool to lighten their load and not as a human being that is owed some modicum of human dignity and respect, we haven't even gotten to love yet. If that's the level of conversation and you can't see it, then the problem is not with her. Too many of our women have been socialized to see us as footstools. We've been socialized to measure our value against how well we keep her feet off the ground. And there are scores of black men who can and do. Believe it or not, despite all the trials we face, there are black men that do that job well. Even though the percentage of us that make over six figures is minimal, there's still many black men that are capable and do take care of their families. And yet, the discourse around how to receive black male attention, support, love, has nothing to do with reciprocating a goddamn thing. Now, is that a reflection of all relationships and women? Absolutely not. But the discourse in public media about relationships between men and women is objectifying. And it's interesting to me because the whole notion of objectification in gender studies is only associated with women. Objectification is only something women experience, and they mainly complain about sexual objectification. Now, you're talking about a population of men who've been used as breeders on plantations during slavery. So somehow, black men don't experience sexual objectification. I would argue they experience it more than anybody else and continue to, because we're still seen as walking phalluses to this day. But beyond that, the very notion of us being nothing more than a utility just kind of goes unregarded. Now, I'm not talking about Erica Lachey. She had 2 videos I found questionable, a bunch of other videos where she said some interesting things. My question is not so much her. My question is more about the discussion in regard to black men in relationships. And if something like that type of objectification can come from someone like her, what does the discussion look like with the everyday woman? Y'all tell me. So to answer the question, are black men at war alone? There are a number of black men who I have heard from, talked to, that have partners that respect them and are in their corners. They have individuals at work who will go to bat with them if there's an issue, especially on the basis of race. They have boys that will fight police officers in terms of helping them. On an individual level, there are some black men that are able to talk about support on a variety of levels in their lives, and I applaud them for that. But when I step back and look at this from a macro perspective, I don't see it. If you look at the last presidential election, how many, even black women who were talking about the need to elect Biden, how many of them prioritize black male issues even when talking to black males? You know what I saw? The closest example of that I saw was a campaign of strippers trying to get black men to vote. That's what you think of us. I can identify individual black women who have been supportive. Hell, there's some right here in the chat. But my question isn't about individuals. My question is, in any of these different contexts, what institutional or macro support are we seeing that black men can rely on? I'm not an alarmist, even though I know it seems that way. I'm not suggesting that there's nothing just because it sounds, sounds provocative. I know that's the accusation. But I'm actually just looking at it, and I don't